Okay, well, I'm really excited to lead tonight's community Zoom. And we're going to start out with a little presentation on labeling. So labeling is something that I've done a lot of custom branding, a lot of custom labeling, label design for various brands over the years. I've probably tried every style of paper label you can try. And so got a lot of opinions and a little bit of experience. And I'd love to share that with you guys tonight. But above all, labeling is your key to clear communication. So labels perform a function. Obviously, they are the first way that we talk to our customer. They're our first impression for our brand. They get the message across better than we'll be able to from the shelf of a yarn store. It's the prequel to your website visit. It's the prequel to joining your newsletter list. So you want to make a best first impression. Great labels say a lot more than what's written on them. A label with good design that complements and communicates the style and value of your brand, it makes your yarn feel more like you, more authentically you. And that should always be the goal of any branding, is to communicate who you are, what you're making, and the quality level that you're aiming for, all in one simple, concise visual package with information included, obviously. But for the most part, that branding and label is like right between the visual interaction that you have with your customer and then a verbal interaction you have with them as they read. So here are a few labels that I wanted to share with you guys that I personally enjoy for different reasons. The first label that I'm going to show you is from a company called Les Chevaux Solidaires. And if we have any French speakers in the room and I totally butchered that, I'm sorry. I've taken 7 years and I'm still guessing. What I love about this particular brand is that they're really trying to go for a luxury feel. They price their yarns a little bit higher than what they pay for them, and then they donate a huge portion of their profits directly back to a charity that they are affiliated with. So the entire purpose of this brand is to get the customer to buy a higher end luxury product. And it really gets communicated here through the paper choice. So we've got a matte black paper, we have a foil finish, they use gold or copper finish foiling, and then they've slid the belly band, which is that wraparound style of label, all the way up to the ugly end, or what I like to call the bump end, and hidden all of the ties under it. So it gives that extra step of like thoughtfulness and a luxury feel. And you can look up pictures of unboxings for this brand online. They also do, I mean, these hanks just look beautiful all sitting together, which is really important if luxury is something you want to communicate from your brand. Blue Sky Alpacas is always a favorite with any of my label and branding clients. They do a really excellent job. They've always done a really excellent job of branding and labeling their products. So when they rolled out extra and wool stock a few years ago, these are alpaca and alpaca blended yarns. They used a lot of hang tag labels, which they had previously used, but then they completely redesigned them. So each of the yarn lines has a different feel and vibe, a communication to the customer. With Extra, which is this big, squishy alpaca merino skein, they're trying to convince you that this is a workhorse yarn that you need to have in your stash. So they give it this general store branding. They made the tag square so that it stands out. They used colors that communicate action to us, like red. And then this soft yellow background reminds us of faded old labels. So they're establishing historical trust. They're establishing an element of familiarity with the general store branding. They're giving us this message that this is something that's, been around a long time and definitely trustworthy. Retrosaria by Rosa Pomar is a small artisan brand based out of Portugal. They are spinning yarns in Spain and Portugal and trying to revive the textile industry there, similarly to what we're trying to do here in the US every day. She's a little bigger scale than maybe a small mill like what we're working with. We're like an artisan mill, and I would say she's probably working with some larger facilities, but she recaptures that artisan quality through her branding to really communicate the idea that she's on the same level as the type of product that we're producing. And she does this with these individual hand-drawn illustrations that feel very personalized. It feels a little like going through someone's cupboard and seeing their little doodles on everything. And when you see them all lined up in a yarn store, you're seeing all the different labels and able to quickly identify the differences between yarns that are packaged the same. So a lot of her yarns are in this skein ball put up. So on a shelf, they're going to be pretty nondescript, all lined up end to end. But if you were to put them across, you would have all the different labels, and it adds this like visual element. But because she's done them in black and white, they don't necessarily compete with the yarn the way other busy labels might. Let's talk about label styles. So I threw some words around in the last part of the presentation, and I just want to clarify. The most common yarn style for, especially for smaller brands, is the belly band. This style of label is easy to execute and often the most cost effective because we can print it at home. Belly bands can be printed off with any paper that will run through your inkjet or thermal printer, and then you can cut it with a paper trimmer or with scissors if you've got a good steady hand for that. Wrap it around the center, tape the back. You can add a sticker for the colorway name. This is a very, very commonly used setup. I wanted to show the ritual dies at the top. Their way of doing it, they also slide the belly band all the way to the end for that kind of like more indie luxe feel. But Bare Naked Wools by Knit Spot, they have a lot of information on their belly band, so they want it to be front and center on the yarn, and they put it in the center. There's no like right or wrong placement. It's just about where your brand wants to go and what you want to communicate. Some brands get belly bands wrong by using the wrong paper, making it too wide, not measuring the skein length, choosing colors of paper that conflict with the yarn visually. I'm sure that some of you have stepped into booths and you've seen just like paper, like you just see only the paper first because the label is on neon green or hot pink, and it's just overwhelming. Now, sometimes you can have the opposite effect. Let's say that you do all your labels on craft paper and then all of your yarns are really brightly colored. Well, then that craft paper becomes an anchoring effect and it brings a sense of natural, neutral stability to your brand. So choosing the color of your label is important. One downside to belly bands is that they have the least real estate visually for information. So because they have to circle the object that is the yarn, you really are only presenting one side at a time to the customer without them physically having to remove it from your booth or the store shelf and look at it from all sides. The information all has to be on one side of a piece of paper as well, and you have to have real estate space taken up by a sticker or a sealer. Okay. So here's some tips for successful belly bands. Avoid papers that are labeled text or copy weight papers. These are going to be too light. They won't hold up well. You want something that's a cover stock or a card stock, but you don't want to go too thick or it won't fold correctly. I would suggest if you're thinking about doing print at home labels, you can pre-order sample paper from sites like Cardstock Warehouse where you just get one sheet. And then you can review a whole bunch of papers together in person, feeling and touching them, running them through your printer with your artwork before you settle on what you want to do. And for most yarns, an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper is really all you need because you can turn it landscape, print the labels that way. So it is totally possible to have great labeling that you print at home. Consider both black and white and color options, but stick with a neutral background if possible. Again, you've got that massive pink that just sticks out at you or a bright color, it's going to distract from what you're actually selling and making. And then another idea that I don't see very commonly is that big box brands on the reverse side of these labels, they include a pattern or more information. If you're printing at home, why not print two-sided? You know, line up your artwork correctly, take the time and print two-sided so that you can include a link to a pattern, a QR code to a pattern giveaway for your shop or your store or your farm, information on tours if you're the type of firm who's doing tours. If you are a yarn brand that doesn't have pattern support, maybe what you include instead is a 10% discount coupon on the back. Just something fun for the customer really would take a lot of belly bands next level, because right now they just kind of get slid off and thrown away. Another style of label is the pull through. This is a little less common. It was very popular in like 2010, 2012, Madeline Tosh used to use it, and then they switched to belly bands. It's something that I've used for a long time for one of my design clients, Knit Crate. They use all of their labels this way. They're easy to apply. So it's essentially just a slightly differently shaped variation on a belly band. You can kind of adjust it a little bit more without it taking up too much space and making the yarn feel stiff, or taking up too little and not having enough information. It can be a little more visually impactful. You can play with design a little more through it. And it hides that bump end, which is always the little messy end, and gives the full skein the ability to be squished. Some tips with this are to play with paper textures. It's one of the few labels that really lends itself to this. Special printing, color options to show off a really cool logo. If you have a highly illustrative logo, this is a good choice for you. You do have to still prioritize information, but it's possible to design a very long label if you have a lot of info you want to get. And I recommend closing these with double-sided taper scrapbooking glue instead of stapling them. I see a lot of brands staple them or put, like Madeline Tosh uses a piece of clear tape. It just looks a little less finished to me than if you were to just use that little bit of scrapbooking glue dot and like close it up and not have to worry about it visually. The last label style I'm going to talk about is the hang tag. So these are some hang tags I designed for Quarter Moon Fiber Company. These were custom printed. Hang tags are maybe my favorite label type to design. They're the same size as business cards, which opens us up to virtually any company that prints business cards to print labels. And all you have to do to turn it from a business card into a hang tag is punch a hole. Somewhere along the top corner, you can select the corner. You can even get special shapes, special printing options. You can get very high end with a hang tag. Because it's double-sided, you can include so much more information across the back of the tag without compromising your branding in the front of the tag. They can get a little messy if you display most of your yarn in cubbies or cubes. And I know this is a really common way of displaying, especially with wire cubes at events and shows. A good way to counteract this is not to make your length too long of the actual hang part of the tag, to take the time to measure and make sure it's the right distance. And then also when you're displaying the yarn, to take extra care that the hang tags are facing out every other layer. What should be on a yarn label? So your label should always have easy to read information. It should always include information about your fiber content. So is it 100% wool? A lot of you will be able to drill down even further than just face level alpaca wool. You can say 100% Corriedale wool. You can say 100% alpaca raised in Washington County. So there's lots of options for how you list the fiber content, but it should be there, especially for people with allergies. The yardage or meterage against the weight of the skein. If you will be selling or you hope to sell to overseas or Canadian markets, it's good to go ahead and put the meterage on there. You don't have to, but they really do seem to appreciate it, so I would. And then the weight of the skein, whether you want to list it in ounces or grams is up to you. The color name, you can add this on either by hand if you have good handwriting, or you can add it on with a sticker. The dye lot number. If you are doing dye lots, it's good to include a dye lot number for obvious reasons. If someone wants to make a larger project, they want to try to match their dye lot number across all the skeins. If you don't have a dye lot number, for example, you're just selling it without dyeing it at all, then obviously you would leave this information off. You could replace it with the animal name. You could replace it with the name of the fiber colorway. If it's like a Shetland where there's different colors for the sheep, that could be a very cool thing to put there. Additional information about your yarn can also be included if you have room. Things like the working yarn weight, recommended needle size and gauge, fiber care instructions, how to wash and dry the material, production chain information. That's us, spun at Bat and Kill Fibers in Washington County, New York. If you aren't selling yarn, but you're selling any kind of other textile goods, sweaters, pre-made knitted objects, woven blankets, anything that you're working on or with us for. Your label should also have fiber content and product care instructions. You don't have to include the color name or the yardage or meterage. You could include a measurement if you want, but these are like the two must-haves if it's not yarn. Oh, and other elements required by your sales channel. So some venues for selling objects require some other classifications. You don't need to worry about standards like, flammability information if you're selling yarn, but if you're selling a garment, you might have to include that on the label. So make sure that you know the elements required by your specific sales channel and your industry. So we talked about the business cards earlier being a good option for hang tags, and often your budget is the ultimate limit for material choices and finishes, but I wanted to share a few options that I feel like are just slight little ups that make a label feel really special. So when I budget for a label, typically I like to budget $1, but most of the time it comes under. So I've run labels anywhere from 40 to 75 cents. It's good to estimate safely so that we have wiggle room for all the ideas, and you can use things like recycled cotton or recycled craft paper. We've got a spot gloss print here. That's the black card that says Enigma. That's when you have just a UV layer to the paper and it adds shininess. Now it's not the most eco-friendly, so if your brand is to communicate eco-friendliness, you wouldn't want to use that. The same goes for like the foil print accents. Another fun way to play is with a die cut shape. Some companies that I print with will offer us die cut shapes to choose from, or you can have a custom die cut made. That's pretty expensive, but if you're doing a lot of yarn and you want something really special that's going to stand out on the shelf, it's always an option. We can also think beyond paper labeling. Things like canvas project bags, tote bags, these brown paper bags that Blue Sky Alpacas use, they just put a labeling sticker on the front. That's all that's happened here. And we can print a labeling sticker. That's not hard at all. So you can really upgrade any kind of packaging with just a really beautiful photo sticker, as shown also with this Pearl Soho Learn to Knit kit. I think Pearl Soho has some great product branding and I love to take notes from them. Their colors are really bright, but the way that they handle just the simplicity of design is really great. You can also do a whole branding package. Your label is just the first step towards the mood of an overall branding. This is one of my favorite branding companies that I've ever seen in the yarn space. It's crazy. This company is called Squiggle Yarn Co. They're based in Australia. They're all about hot heat, hot color, and they just load everything with these neons and pastels, and they're really all in on it. And I love how much they've embraced that in all of their branding, their photography, their everything that they send. Obviously, all these little elements have a cost attached to them, but you can get this a similar feel in your brand's style for not as much money as you would think. So this is a pretty wild example just to catch your attention, but it's definitely possible with any brand. So the whole goal of this presentation is to really roll out and introduce this new labeling service that I'm kind of offering through Bat and Kill. We have a flow for designing labels for you. There's different steps to that flow. The initial meeting would define your needs for labeling. We'd hop on a call and talk through your branding as is. I'd ask some pointed branding questions before and during the meeting, getting a really good feel for what you're looking for. And then the next stages would be design concepting and then a design finalization. And then at the end of the finalization period, you'd either get a final file that you can print at home or a file that then I help you send on to a printer. And that printer can either send the labels directly to you for assembly or send it to us. We're also offering label application services. And the service costs kind of vary. The initial meeting is always free. As a Bat and Kill customer, especially if you've ordered with us in the past 18 months or you're currently working on ordering a product that's in our job line, you're eligible for a free initial consultation meeting as part of your product design process with us. A very simple label design. So just taking your existing branding and turning it into a label file designed for you to print at home or have professionally printed. That's about $200. Label cost is not included in this pricing. That's just the design time, but it can run anywhere from 1 to 4 hours, 4 hours on the heavy end. And after that, you have all the files that you need to print your own design through whatever service you want. And then the packaging and product design, if you need everything designed, if you have special packaging design, these are variable. They can take anywhere from 2 hours to 15 hours. So that I bill hourly, and also the full rebranding and product suite bills hourly. And all these are going to be included in the recap email. We're also recording this presentation right now, so we'll be adding this to a new page on the website soon. We also have the ability to apply your label at the mill. So if you need the belly band applied, a loop through tag applied, a hang tag applied, and you want to have it designed, shipped to the mill, applied to your yarn, and then everything shipped to you done, we are able to do that. We're kind of quoting those per job with the employee labor cost, and we're feeling out how many hours that's going to take right now. Every job will be a little bit different, but it's definitely something that we're able to do. So that is my big long presentation, and I'm going to have MJ turn off the recording.
Yeah, you're gonna, huh?
If you know how, I don't. So now we're going to move to the portion of this chat that is about booth design. Booth design is such a special sort of situation because every single show or festival that you go to is going to have a little different scenario, some wrench to throw into your plans. Either your booth may have been moved from a location, or it's extra muddy that year and you need to come up with a solution for that, or everyone who's coming in is rainy and stinky, and then they're going to touch all your stuff. You know, there's like a million possible situations and scenarios when you go to any kind of festival or even an indoor show like a convention. The first way that I start with any kind of booth planning is always to look at my available inventory. If you're planning for how much you're going to take to a show, set up a sample booth for yourself at home. It doesn't have to be your full-size booth, maybe just a section, like a 4 foot by 4 foot mock-up in your living room with tape on the floor and one shelf, and see how much yarn fits into your cubby display. What looks good, what doesn't look good, what's too full, what's not full enough, and then multiply that by the amount of storage space that you know that you're going to have, and that's how much inventory you should take to the show, plus some in backstock. Almost every company that I've gone to a show with always has bins of yarn under the tables. So skirted tables, get tablecloths. They're not that expensive, and they hide all your backstock, your office supplies that you're going to need in the booth, all these little elements that make up the booth. You should always have a toolkit. I think most people watching are going to already know this, but I just want to reiterate it for anyone who is maybe attending their first fiber show this year and watching this, or maybe you've had a couple of fiber shows and it always feels overwhelming and exhausting to you, and one of these tips is going to resonate and like fix that in some way. So with your booth planning, you want to create merchandising, and merchandising is the flow. It's the directed flow of customers through your store or your space, in this situation through your booth. So you want to think about, how does the customer come into the booth? How do they navigate the space, and how do they exit the booth? There's a reason that U-shaped setups are very popular, and it's because it creates a flow of traffic, but you should always make sure that your aisle areas are big enough that people can move around each other and navigate, because you're going to have that one person who's going to show up and they're trying to match like 6 different skeins, and they're just going to crouch down in the middle, and they're going to be pulling all the things out, and everybody's going to be trying to get around them. So if you have a big booth, maybe don't put an island in them. I mean, if you have a smaller booth, don't put an island in the middle. If you have a bigger booth, think about ways that you can create insets. Maybe you have a little peninsula that comes out between sections in your largest wall, and it creates a cubby where people can duck in to review their product choices while other people navigate around them. So definitely think about the flow and the setup of your booth. Then we could talk about MJ's favorite part of your booth, labeling all of your yarn. So there are a few different cool ways that I've seen people display yarn hang tags or informational tags in their booth. There's always the people who have the little laminated card with the two holes in each corner, and then they have zip ties or clothespins or clips, and they just hook it onto the top of the wireframe. That's always an option. You can really make that card look like whatever you want. If you want to communicate the same feel as the rest of your brand, I would recommend doing it in a legible version of your logo font. Or if you have a very scripty logo font, maybe one of the fonts off your website. You want to carry over every customer experience that someone has when they enter your space, whether they're entering your space through your website, through a purchase at a yarn store, through a purchase at a festival where they get to meet you. You want to communicate the same information to them over and over every time. So the more consistency with branding you have, the better. Another way that I've seen some people display things is they get those little photo display spirals. It's like a wire that comes up and it's got a heart or a spiral at the top, and you tuck a photo into it. And at the bottom, it has a little weight. These are good for if you've got some table space where you can set out that little thing, but they do get knocked over if your booth gets really crowded. Another option is to make little signs, and I haven't seen any super cool handmade signs. I see a lot of the chalk ones, and those are pretty great. If you're good with calligraphy, you can write in chalk marker on the little chalk wedding display cards, and those make great, really any wedding table card, table number. The stuff that you can write on is a good place to hunt for display ideas for yarn shows. But I would love to see someone who has a crafty, handy person in their life make some that look like old-fashioned store signs with little hanging signs that like sway. Like that's my dream, is to see some of these. So I'm going to give you guys this idea, and maybe someday I'll find it at a show and I'll be like, somebody did it. But you know, the old little store signs that stick out. It would be so cute to go to a show and at the top of the shelves have the little sticky out store signs with all the information on it. Also, something that you might consider doing is putting out informational cards. A lot of people are going to stop by your booth. They're going to look, they're going to say, oh, I want to see what else is here. I haven't been through the whole show yet. Having a card that they can take with them that has maybe pictures of your yarn or something about your brand might bring them back into your booth after they do the full rotation. If you include a value item on that card for them, a coupon code for your online store, a discount code for digital, instructions on how to join your newsletter, a free pattern, whatever you want to put on there, as a lead magnet can bring someone back to even after a show. Even if they came and they're a looky-loo and they came with 5 other people to the show and they're just having a girls' weekend with sheep involved and they're going home and they're not buying any yarn, when they go home and they look through all the free stuff that they got, your cart is going to be there. And it has a bonus thing on the back. It has bonus information or something else that they're going to get excited about, paired with something really pretty on the front. And that's going to remind them, oh, I liked that booth. I want to check out stuff about it. And don't hand these out, like indicate that they're there, but let the customer pick them up, because there's nothing worse as a customer than getting home and having all these things you have to throw away. But if you pick it up, you chose it. And that also means that you as a vendor are not wasting your money on people who don't want the item. Every single one of those cards, they might be cheap, but they did cost you money. So try to keep it as much as you can and only give it out to people who really are interested in your product. So those are my booth tips.